Warning, you are now entering a diversity zone where different opinions are tolerated. This is not a safe space. This is Pellowe Talk.
G'day and welcome to Pellowe Talk. I'm Dave Pellowe. I was on Twitter recently and came across this interesting tweet by someone called Naughty Derek. And it was really interesting because it was his personal story about his and his girlfriend's experience with abortion. And I reached out to Derek and asked him if he wouldn't mind sharing that story with me and with my viewers, because I wanted you guys to hear from as many people as possible about their stories and their experience with abortion. There's lots of information and misinformation, and what I want to get is as much conversations as possible with real life experiences as well as experts, so that we can truly have informed choices in this conversation. And so it's my pleasure to welcome to the show now to tell his own story, Naughty Derek. How are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing extremely well, thank you. Listen, start from the top. Tell me, I guess, the story in your own words, especially the context of who you were and what you were doing and what life was like for you leading up to the days where you found yourself facing the choice of what to do with an unplanned pregnancy.
Absolutely. To start with, I shared this story originally intending it to be among my rather small Twitter following. I had some people ask me before why I was so passionate about pro-life and protecting the lives of unborn children. So that's what this thread grew out of. It wasn't an intention to force anything upon anyone. It was my intention to explain why I felt so passionately about this subject. It begins when I was about 22. I was a young man, like most of us are. I had dropped out of college, was working kind of a dead-end job, and I spent most of my time and whatever money I was able to scrape together after I was done paying for rent and food and all that to go out and drink. So pretty much every night there's a bar that I really liked by my house. I'd go down there and I'd drink the night away. If I had friends I would swing through, we'd go downtown and find a party or a more active bar, and we'd go down there. That was pretty much my life. I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't have anything that I felt was worth living for. So I lived in the moment. Whatever was the most fun at the time was what I wanted, and that's what I did if I could afford to. I had an old beat-up car. I worked at a grocery store stocking shelves for, just above minimum wage. So one night, my friends came out on my birthday. We got exceedingly drunk, even more so than normal. We ended up deciding to go bar hopping downtown. The city that I live in, it's a beautiful city in West Michigan. We have, a wonderful downtown district with a whole bunch of different bars. So it was a, great thing to do for my birthday. At one of them, I ended up running into a old flame, I guess you would say. She was extremely nice girl, very pretty. We ended up hooking up that night, a couple other times as well. We didn't know each other beyond, a name and a phone number. We never put any effort to get to know each other besides, are you going to be out at the bar tonight?
Okay.
A few months later, doing the same thing, drinking on the weekends, weekdays, whenever I could, and stocking shelves. I was working the night shift. At that point, I got a call, so I took my break. It was from Jenna, and she was pregnant. And I'm kind of staring down reality suddenly that I'm 22, I live in my parents' basement, I've got a car that barely runs, I've got a basically dead-end job, and now here's this girl who I barely even know, and she's pregnant. So that was kind of a wake-up.
That must have been a tough situation.
Yeah, I was used to disappointing my parents, so uh, I wasn't too worried about that. I just was lost. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. Um, Obviously I'd heard horror stories about young men who had done the same thing and their life was basically ruined, and they went through all these trial and tribulations related to something similar. So yeah, I was extremely scared. Like we had talked about earlier, I was raised in the church, and I'd fallen away during college and basically become uninterested in religion in general. I still had the number of one guy who was kind of a pastor and also a mentor to my senior class in high school. So I gave him a call, and I explained the situation to him, and he asked me what I planned to do, and kind of the first thing that went through my mind was, I'm not the type to plan. I've never had a plan in my life.
Wow.
I haven't executed a plan. I mostly live in the moment. He asked me if I wanted a kid. Obviously, my answer was no. I had no interest in having children. I wanted to live for myself. I wanted to do the fun things that I thought were fun. I wanted to not have the responsibility of that. So no, I didn't really have any interest in having a kid. It wasn't something that I, ever felt like I desired at that point.
Yeah.
So he said, listen, I've seen people in your position before. I've seen it turn out good, and I've seen it turn out bad. And he said the ones who it turned out good, it took a lot of work, and it also took help. And he gave me the phone number for a counselor, a couples counselor, marriage counselor, whatever you want to call it. But she was a professional who dealt with people in similar situations. So later that day, I called her, complete stranger. I explained what was going on. She had a pretty reasonable, proposition to me. She said, well, why don't, you and Jenna come in here. This is a safe place where we can meet. I'm not on anyone's side. I just want to facilitate conversation between the two of you.
Great.
So that we can kind of get on the same page and we can figure out what's going on. I didn't know it then, but Karen was her name, but her and her husband were, very deeply involved in the pro-life movement. And it was something that they were passionate about, was helping young people, through situations like this. So Jenna and I called Jenna and I said, look, I don't know what we're going to do, but, let's meet this woman who's offering to help us kind of figure out what we should do. Jenna agreed, and I didn't know it at the time, but for Jenna to agree to something like that is a little out of her comfort zone. Jenna's very much an introvert, so opening herself up to a complete stranger was very out of character for her.
Wow.
Obviously I didn't know this at the time. It's more impressive in hindsight.
Let me just interrupt your story there, and maybe I should save this question till later, but I'm going to ask it now. What was her mindset at the time? Just give us a little segue. What was going through Jenna's mind right now? What was she hoping when she called you? Did she have any hopes, or was it just automatic?
I don't really know. I mean, I don't think her hope was to hitch her wagon to a guy who was kind of a loser.
Yeah, sure.
I think her hope was, I was the closest involved to it. I was kind of the one who shared the secret with her.
Yeah.
And she didn't really have anyone she felt comfortable going to about it. So
wow.
I was...
I'm aware there's and I won't pluck a number, and I'm not aware of the specific number, but there's a large percentage of women who regret their abortion later and say that if only someone had been there to walk the journey with them and offer them some support of any kind, then they would have made a different decision. So it's not uncommon what Jenna and yourself were feeling, that isolation and that need, that, you know, deer in the headlights kind of response of where to from here. So tell me more about I interrupted you. You were just starting to see this relationship counsellor.
Yeah. So Jen and I show up, and you know, we don't really know each other. We had talked and texted a little bit more, trying to figure out what we were going to do. And we meet Karen at her office, and very, you know, nice older lady. And the first part of a couples counseling, we sit down, a spider drops from the ceiling, and Karen has a little bit of a freak out, is convinced that it's Satan trying to sabotage
Wow.
our session together. Yeah. Apparently she had a fear of spiders. It seemed a little out there for us, you know. Neither of us, you know, Jenna more so than I, but neither of us were particularly, you know, religious at the time. I mean, you know, Jenna was still a Christian, obviously. But seeing this woman who's supposed to be counseling us pray over this, you know, spider that she saw, we kind of looked at each other and we said, what in the world did we get ourselves into? And through this counseling, what we began to notice was that Karen constantly put us in situations where we would have something to discuss, where we'd feel like either she was pushing against us, but what Karen was always doing was making it us. She was, you know, making everything that we thought about, that we talked about, and the concept of how are we going to do this? How do you see this, you know, yourselves raising this kid and all that? So it was a good experience for, you know, two scared kids to have someone who really knew what she was doing to help us kind of discover where we were and who we were, really. Yeah.
So you mentioned in your story that Jenna came from a really, really good background. Her dad was a doctor. She basically had her life handed to her, her dreams, a really good life. And in your words, I'd never be so mean, but in your words, you described yourself as a screw-up, and the worst possible decision she could have made from a bunch of options she had at this time, including adopting it and killing it. And option C was the option to actually join her life to yours and raise this baby together as husband and wife. So where did she go? How did things progress after this relationship counselling all through it?
Well, through the relationship counseling, we got to know each other, and we really found out we had not so much a lot in common, but we worked really well together. We were able to be both mature about the situation, understand that, you know, it was more than us. You know, Karen helped us really, you know, drive it home that the decisions we're making are no longer affecting just us. There's a third party involved.
Wow.
So she helped us realize that the decisions that we were making were no longer just about, you know, you and me. You're making decisions for a third innocent party.
So true.
But yeah, so Jenna was, you know, she came from a good family. She worked hard. She did, you know, well in school. She excelled in sports. She worked hard at that. You know, she had, you know, everything going for her. She, you know, she could have chosen an easy way out. Nobody would have known, and she would have continued on and you know, graduated college, gone on to be a nurse or something more, and this would have blown over after a few years. And, you know, Jenna chose the hard path. Like you said, well, like I said, she hitched her wagon to a basically deadbeat loser.
You're living in your basement with a car that barely runs, making less than $10 an hour, and the daughter of this doctor whose future was all in front of her and laid out, and she chose you.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Karen was aware of the situation, and Karen did a wonderful job of bringing Jen's expectations to where a lifestyle would be. I got on. I don't know if you know who Dave Ramsey is.
No.
He's a financial advisor. He's a faith-based financial advisor, very popular in
Okay.
America. But
Okay.
it's a series of steps to get yourself in a financial position to be able to bless yourselves and bless others. It's
Wow.
fantastic.
Good ambition. Good move.
So I started going through. He's got a program called the Baby Steps where it helps you become financially independent, which I wasn't at the time. And basically, what it amounted to me was, I had to step up. I had to work all the hours that I could. I had to go from being kind of a slack off employee to the best one they had, while at the same time impressing, the supervisors who didn't think much of me, convincing them to give me the chance and the opportunity. So I took every minute of overtime I could get. I worked my tail off to show these guys that I was serious, and they gave me opportunities to prove to them that, I was willing to change. And through that, I got some small promotions and raises to the point where, I could afford an apartment on my own, if we had to.
Wow. It occurs to me that you were very immature at 22 years old, living in your mum's basement, just indulging in reckless, irresponsible lifestyle, getting drunk, sleeping with women, left, right, and centre, with no thoughts to the consequences or your own responsibility. And then you matured incredibly rapidly, that you actually had the character to make the tough decision and make the decision to grow up and take responsibility, both for the woman that you'd gotten pregnant, for the person who you'd helped create, and for your entire lot and situation in life. And, as harsh as the assessment might be of you at 22, I'm impressed with who you were at 23.
Yeah, and like I said, as Karen kind of opened my eyes to what was happening around me, I guess my heart began to change. I realized that I couldn't live for myself anymore. I had
Great.
people who were depending on me, and really it began to change me. I stopped going out to the bars. I stopped hanging out with most of those people. I just kind of cut them out of my life, and I focused on doing, I guess, kind of the storybook right things. I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but I imagined in a movie of a kid getting his life together, this is what he'd do. So
Wow.
I kind of, I kind of followed that. And I had a fantastic mentor. He was a family friend of my father.
Wow.
Very direct and honest guy, and he basically said, Derek, you've got to, shape up, in very much more crude terms. He was very blunt and honest with me about where I would be if I didn't change who I was and how I was acting.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing for me to get through the initial stages was I was lucky enough to seek out the right people, or blessed, guided by God, I guess I'd look at it now.
Sure.
But I had the right people come into my life to help me make the right decisions. I don't know if we didn't have Karen, what we'd be today or where we'd be.
Yeah. And look, that's a really good point to make, is that, we who maybe aren't in this situation can be the people that offer support to those people who are in this situation without judging them or heaping condemnation upon them. Everybody makes mistakes, but we can be that support structure that possibly saves the life of a child. And we can also, perhaps partner with those organisations, those counselling centres and people who are doing that professionally in a full-time way, which usually doesn't attract much profit or funding.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say, farther on in my story, we'll get to that, but we ended up getting a lot of help from my parents down the road. And a lot of people got hung up on, well, you guys got help from your family. That's why you're able to get through this. Yes, I acknowledge that. But the bigger thing is that we had people in place who, it wasn't financial support. It wasn't anything like that. They were people who were willing to listen to us, who were empathetic to us, who genuinely wanted the right outcome for us. Yeah. It wasn't a political motivation. It was from the heart. They wanted to see these two kids and this little baby come to the best conclusion.
And you know what? That political motivation, I actually believe, of both the people I disagree with and people on my perspective, that everybody actually, or at least most people, really do have a sincere motive for their political motivations. So people on the left and people on the right, there's somewhere in there an underlying compassion. And I think we do a discredit to the debate when we don't give people the benefit of the doubt that they're motivated by love and compassion. If somebody talks about a woman's right to make decisions about her body, I don't disagree with that simple argument. What I disagree with is that the debate's only about the woman's body, when it's actually about three different people, the mother, the father, and a third person who we hope doesn't end up in a bucket. And that's not the woman's body. And we still want to offer empathy. And so certainly if you're watching this video, this interview, the purpose of this is so that you can relate to somebody's story who's walked through it themselves. I myself have had the offer of an abortion when my wife and I were pregnant with our third child with potential medical complications. And so we want to continue this story in just a second, but certainly in the notes beneath this video and maybe underneath the screen right now, I'm going to put up the numbers and details for places where you can get free counselling and you can get the support that you need, because you don't need to go through the very difficult situation of an unplanned pregnancy by yourself. There is support, and there is more than one option, more than two options. There are plenty of choices available for you, not just the abortion choice. But Derek, tell me more about the support you got from your parents. At what stage, one of the cutest parts, loveliest, endearing parts of your story that I read on Twitter was where you and Jenna couldn't get the courage together to tell her parents that you two had gone a little bit too far. You started spending more time at her place, and how did that come about?
Well, Jen and I agreed that, at some point through the counseling, we came to the conclusion that marriage was probably best for us. And I don't know so much that, we had this Hollywood version of love. I think we had a commitment to each other to do the right thing. And we had a love for Charlie, that we didn't know it was Charlie at the time, but we had a love for our unborn child, and we wanted to do the right thing. And we actually talked about it with Karen, and we actually almost compared it to a forced marriage that, worked.
An arranged marriage.
An arranged marriage, I'm sorry.
Gotcha, yeah.
But in a way, our circumstances that we put ourselves in forced us into this. And the best option for us was to be mature about it and work to try and love each other.
Well, there's a huge secret there that a lot of marriages miss, and that is marriage success isn't built on romance or even love. It's built on commitment and communication. And if you've got those two things working for you, and each person putting in 100%, you've got a lot of success on your side, a lot of odds on your side. But continue. You decided to make it like an arranged marriage and go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we came to the conclusion that we were going to be committed to each other and that we'd work every day to love each other.
Awesome.
Part of that was getting to know each other's families. For Jenna to meet my family, it was, I think, a little easier. I mean, my mom's a little wild and out there. But my family's pretty open and accepting and very much laid back. Jenna, I don't think Jenna had ever brought a boy home or a boyfriend for, family dinner or anything like that.
Is she much younger than you?
She's 2 years younger than me.
Okay, so she was about 20 at this time.
And
she'd never brought a boy home.
Not to my knowledge. I think maybe with other groups of people, but never in the never as a this is my boyfriend.
Wow. Yeah.
So Jenna had an older brother, and he went to a different school than me, but both of our schools were close to each other, and we had a lot of friends groups that knew each other. And he had asked around, and he found out about who I was and what I was. So he was under no illusion of kind of the kind of person I was, and he had shared that with Jenna. And
the protective older brother, good on him.
Yeah, so Jenna was under no illusion to who I was before this as well. So eventually we got to the point where Jenna was far enough along, she would start showing, and her parents would probably put two and two together and figure it out on their own. And we definitely didn't want them to figure it out on their own. Our intention wasn't to hurt them or make them feel like we were trying to hide a secret from them. We intended to tell them. Unfortunately, Jenna felt a lot of shame still. And every time we tried to tell them together as a couple, Jenna would get a panic attack. And, she'd be unable to breathe, unable to talk. We weren't able to tell them together. It finally dawned on me that I was going to have to tell Jenna's dad, who I'd known for 2 or 3 months, maybe a little longer than that his daughter was pregnant by this, young man who he knew to be probably rather troubled. So I got her dad's phone number, and I called his office, and I asked to meet with him. At the time, I wasn't a brave person. I always took the easy way out. I was a coward. I was a weasel. I was that employee at work who always had an excuse, always had some reason why it wasn't my fault, why, it wasn't my responsibility. So this was something difficult for me. So I think her dad probably knew something was up. I mean, somebody doesn't expect a meeting request from someone who's been seeing their daughter for 2 to 3 months. So I have to imagine he knew something was happening when I asked to meet with him. So I walked into his office that evening, and most of his staff was gone. And I sat down and I looked at him, and I didn't really have a plan of what to say, so I just said flat out, I said, there's no easy way to tell you this, but Jen and I are pregnant.
Wow.
And I kind of lost my train of thought after that. And, Jenna's dad is a great person. He's a very kind and gentle man. And I
love this tweet from you in your story. This one sentence: hardest thing I've ever done is telling a good man that I may have just ruined his daughter's dreams and his dreams for her. That's powerful.
Yeah, it weighed heavily on me. I knew Jenna's brother is, going to be a doctor. Her sister was just graduating and was going to be a nurse, and Jenna was going to be a nurse too. And
wow.
I had some idea of, I was starting to begin to have an idea of what it's like to have a child and to have dreams for them. And I knew I was walking into this meeting and I was going to crush all the dreams that this man, thought he had for his daughter. Yeah, it was very difficult.
So how did he take it? You said your daughter and I are pregnant.
Like I said, it looked like he aged about 10 years in front of me. You could kind of see the realization that, what he maybe thought was happening was actually happening.
Poor guy. And yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I went into that meeting and just broke his heart.
Yeah.
So he sat there for a minute and kind of looked thoughtful.
You did, no doubt.
And he said, he was going to call his wife and he would get back to me. Well, I didn't tell Jenna I was going to talk to her father. I was afraid that she would try and talk me out of it or call him off.
Yeah.
So when Jenna's dad called his wife, the whole family was over, and they probably found out in the worst way possible, which was everyone heard it over the phone. And so Jenna's entire family knew at once with no preparation, I guess.
Yeah.
And Jenna called me not long after, and I think, she called me names that would make a sailor blush. It's the only time I've actually heard her that angry.
Wow.
And it was out of fear. She thought her family would, leave her, abandon her, or hate her. Or I guess, she thought she was going to kind of lose her parents' love. And, that's a powerful thing. And what we found was, what we learned at the time, our family wanted what was best for us. Sure, they were disappointed. They were mad. But after the emotions were over, they wanted what was best for us, and they worked hard to help enable that for us. So that night, her mom called me, and I think it was her mom, asked me to dinner. I didn't expect it to go as well as it did.
So you went, my goodness, going to your girlfriend's father's workplace and telling him you got her pregnant, that was tough. But then going around to his place for dinner afterwards and confronting her mum, wow.
And her sisters, and I think her brother was there too. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Her sisters were not pleased with me. One of them was still in high school, fairly young. I think she was a freshman in high school, and
wow.
She really looked up to Jenna, and I think that really kind of messed with her for a little while.
Mm.
But it actually, it went really well. Her family was supportive of us. They expressed that they wanted to do what they could to help us out. Her parents offered to pay for the counseling because we talked to them about the couples counseling we were doing. So they offered to help out with that. And, at the time it was a bit of a burden on me. I still wasn't making a whole lot of money, and I think the counseling was $50 a session. We're going once or twice a week. So
yeah,
that was a big burden.
And you said in your Twitter story that her family offered to pay for that and take care of that for you to support you.
Yes, that's correct.
That's huge.
Yes,
huge for you on $10 an hour.
Yeah, I was making a little bit more at that time after I had picked up on work, but I think I was making maybe $11.50 at that point. Not a lot.
Yeah.
So we, as time went by, Jen and I, kind of decided we're going to get married. Jenna ended up dropping out of school, finishing off, the classes that she had. And she's started sewing decorative pillows to make a little bit of extra money on the side. And she turned out to be extremely adept at that. And
awesome.
She ended up making a lot more money than I was by selling pillows.
Huh, wow.
So it was something that she was able to do from home and, stay at home and get ready for, having this kid in our life. So Jenna really stepped up in a big way there. And we were at dinner with my family one night, and they had kind of known we were looking at apartments, and I don't know, I never really asked my parents why. My dad's hinted at it, but they offered to buy a house and let Jen and I live in it with basically rent free. We had to pay the utilities and the taxes and all that, but they wanted to enable us to have a successful marriage. I think my dad was worried that if we didn't have a stable roof over our head, it'd be much harder for us to last.
Yeah.
And looking back, I appreciate what my parents did, but I think Jen and I were to the point that, if we had to have, kind of the little apartments that we were looking at, or a trailer park, I think we still would have made it, just at a much slower rate.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm talking about financial success at this point, because at that point, I feel like between the marriage counseling and our families, we were pretty committed to each other, and we had
financial stress is a huge contributor to relationship breakup. So having that going for you was definitely a help. It's not the lack of it isn't always a doom to disaster, but it definitely would have made the stresses that you already had to deal with able to be focused on more effectively.
Yeah, and one of the things, and if your viewers, look at my story, there's a lot of people who got hung up on, the fact that we got a house. The house isn't the story.
Of course.
I fully acknowledge that, we got help, but even if we hadn't got a house, even if we had gotten, kicked out and left in the street, we still would have gone through with it. Good. So we found a nice, very modest house. It was just over $100,000 house. It wasn't fancy. But it was in a safe neighborhood. And then a month later, Charlie was born. And, Charlie changed my world. I didn't realize it at the moment, but when I found out about him, he began to save me. Charlie transformed me from basically a directionless screw-up to someone with a purpose. I didn't see it then, but, Charlie, who was just this tiny little human inside Jenna, he changed me more than any outside influence ever could have. He made me be a man, and I really think that he saved my life, and he definitely brought the love of my life into my life. He gave me really a purpose, and I think that's something when we talk about the debate about abortion. There's much more than just a woman and a child and her body. There's also a man in there, and oftentimes, many of these guys were just like me. A young man just living out there for himself, without a purpose.
Yep.
And when you realize that you have a purpose in life, it's much easier to get yourself together, to be a good person, so to speak, to go out there and do the right thing. So, Charlie gave me that purpose in my life, and through that, I was able to find, who I was, and really to be, a much better person.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And you're absolutely right. The story's not about a house making it easier or harder, or even the support of a family making it easier or harder. Certainly, God's good design is for families to be the immediate community and support structures that we're all meant to have. But even in the absence of those things, the right thing to do, the purpose of the story is the value of this third new person in the relationship. It's certainly not just about one person. It's about three people, the mother, the father, and the third person whose vulnerable, innocent life hangs in the balance of other people's decisions, making decisions for them. And it can go from the rock bottom, absolute disaster, ending the life that you thought you were going to have, and then flip that story right around to being the best thing that ever happened to you, the anchor, the rock, and the purpose for life. Sure, it's going to end the reckless and selfish partying of an irresponsible man-child, but it's also going to forge this awesome new character of a man who's mature and responsible and loving and romantic and committed and communicative and leading in love and work ethic for his relationship and for his family. And I certainly stand and applaud not just the moral of your story, but the role that you played in your story. I love the way you referred to it as, what would I do if this was a Hollywood movie? How would I want this to be a good ending? I don't know if that was a tip or if that came to you, randomly, but it's a good way. What would a successful story look like? What would a responsible person do in this situation?
I think that came out of, I don't know what to do. I'm going to try and do what the movies say you should do to be successful. And,
Be careful what movies you watch if you're going to take that approach.
Yeah, I can't remember anything specifically off the top of my head, but I think it's, sometimes Hollywood gets it right with some of these stories about, going kind of from a zero to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, look, probably the right way to... I have heard something similar to that before. It's sort of like, if your goal is to be a successful man, what would the most successful... You don't know what to do, but what would the most successful man in the world do here? You want to be a father. Well, I'm a terrible father. What would the most successful father in the world do right here and right now? It's a good question.
It's almost the phrase, fake it till you make it. And,
yeah, sure.
And I think some of it really was for us faking it. I felt like I was pretending to be a mature person until I actually was a mature person.
And what everybody can take out of that is that you feel like this is unplanned and a surprise and you're ill-equipped to do it, but you're not Robinson Crusoe. You're not on an island all by yourself of inadequacy. Every parent feels like that, even when they're married and planned and everything's right there for them. Most parents would testify that the moment they get left alone with their child or sent home with their child, their brand new first time, it's like, hang on, you're going to trust me to look after this?
Exactly.
So it's great.
So I guess, Dave, that brings us kind of to the conclusion of our story is why exactly am I pro-life?
Yep.
Because I understand that a small, seemingly insignificant, and a helpless human can have a profound impact on this world. Simply by existing, an unborn child has the power to save someone, to radically change a life. Charlie didn't just save me either. He brought Jen and I together, and through that came Henry and then Annie. Two more wonderful and amazing people who will have a huge impact on their world. A life is never a mistake. The power in a life to save others is immense. It may not be clear at the time, but in time it becomes clear. Charlie saved my life, and I would never want someone to lose that opportunity, that amazing chance.
That's absolutely brilliant. Naughty Derek. I love that handle. You got to change that. That's 22-year-old Derek. You're now Derek the Mighty Man.
Yeah, that was originally from when my friends and I would play Xbox. We all had silly names like that, and it just kind of, stuck with me through that.
On the other hand, it also shows that we're all human. None of us are born perfect or perfect this side of eternity, but it's that touch of reality and authenticity that your story isn't a fairy tale. It's hard work. It's a decision, and it's maturity and responsibility from the alternatives. And everybody has those choices at every stage. No matter what choices, no matter what mistakes you've made in the past, you always have the opportunity to forgive yourself, forgive other people, and choose responsibility and maturity going forward. So I congratulate you on good choices after bad ones, and the I guess the campaign to not just save your own kids' lives, but to help other people who are facing that difficult, unplanned situation as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dave.
And as I said previously, if you're watching this and perhaps going through a difficult pregnancy, unplanned pregnancy, I want to acknowledge that that's a very difficult situation for you and must be very hard. So right now, don't think you're alone and don't think you've only got one choice. There are options and there is support available. There will be phone numbers at the bottom of this video in the notes, and we'd love to connect you with pregnancy counselling and give you some real choices and real information to empower you to make the right decision for you. And if you are the victim of abortion and have had that decision in your past, I want you to know it's not the end either, that there is healing and there is counselling that you need for that instead of carrying that wound around forever. It's quite a silent weight that 1 in 3 women over the age of 40 carry with them for the rest of their lives. I know of women in their 60s and 70s who are having to deal with the post-traumatic stress of having had an abortion all those years ago, and they've carried it their entire lives. Don't do that. There is healing and a path forward, and I'd love to connect you with those people now. And I'd also like to hear from you. If you have a story that you'd like to share, please share it in the comments, and maybe indicate whether you'd like to share it publicly as well. And at the same time, if you disagree, or if there's any opinions that you'd like to share, this is a conversation and a discussion. It's not a one-sided lecture by any means. So I'd love to engage you and have that conversation where we both give each other the benefit of the credit of good intentions. And in the meantime, we'll see you on the next episode of Pellowe Talk.